I found out my dad believed in dreams, just not mine. He always told me to work hard, save every penny, and one day I'd build something big. So I did. For 5 years, I skipped vacations, lived in the cheapest apartment I could find, worked 2 jobs, and poured everything into a business plan I'd been developing since college. And then, when I finally had the funds ready, he handed my savings to my sister to open a bakery. Not a loan, not a family partnership, just gave it to her. Let me back up. My name's Michael. I'm 28, single, and I work in logistics. Well, I used to. I was the quiet one in the family, the one who always figured things out. No one really worried about me because I never asked for anything. But that doesn't mean I didn't need support. I have one sibling, Natalie. She's 32, loud, charming, and kind of a natural spotlight magnet. She was the kind of kid who could burn dinner and still get praised for trying something creative. Growing up, I always felt like the background character in her show. My parents, especially my dad, adored her. He used to say she reminded him of his mother. I never quite knew what that meant, but I figured it was his way of saying she was special. And maybe she was. But I was consistent, reliable. I graduated with honors, never got into trouble, never asked for help. I built a spreadsheet for my dreams and lived by it. And that dream? To open a sustainable packaging company. Boring, I know, but it mattered to me. It had potential. I had clients lined up, vendors ready. I just needed a space and the final capital push to launch. So when my dad asked me one day to transfer the $75,000 I had saved into his joint account, saying it would help get some paperwork sorted for the lease, I didn't blink. He'd been supportive all along. He helped me review contracts, gave me old contacts in the industry. I didn't expect betrayal. 3 weeks after that transfer, I came home to find a small envelope on the kitchen table. It was a flyer, Natalie's face beaming next to a sign that read, "Sugar House, grand opening this Saturday." I stared at it for a long time. It was printed on the exact biodegradable paper I had planned to use for my own product line. I wish I could say I stayed calm. I didn't. I drove straight to my parents' house. My dad was in the garage, working on his old truck like always. Grease on his hands, a beer sweating on the workbench. "Hey," I said, "can I talk to you?" He didn't look up, just kept tinkering. "If this is about the money, Natalie's got a real shot with that bakery. You'll bounce back." That was all he said. No apology, no explanation. Just, "You'll bounce back." I felt something crack inside me, something small but sharp, like a wire finally snapping under pressure. "You used my money." "Son, it's all family money. You're overreacting." "I worked for that, for 5 years. He finally turned to me. "She needed a break. You'll be fine. You always are." That was it. No remorse, no guilt. I remember standing in that garage, realizing my place in the family wasn't what I thought it was. I was the fallback, the one they used so Natalie could shine. I didn't say another word. I just walked away. My hands were shaking, but not with rage. More like disbelief. The kind that makes you question whether any of it, your hard work, your loyalty, had ever meant anything. That night, I packed my things and left. I didn't even tell them. I couldn't stand to be in that town another second. But this wasn't the end of the story. Not yet. See, people like my dad think silence means weakness, that someone who walks away quietly won't come back. But sometimes silence is just the sound of a storm gathering strength. I didn't cry. That was the strangest part. There I was, sitting alone in a rental car off some random highway exit, watching the sun go down over a gas station parking lot. And I couldn't cry. Not from anger, not from grief, not even from exhaustion. It was like all my emotions got swallowed up by a black hole of numbness. I'd just lost $75,000. But what hurt more wasn't the money. It was knowing my dad never actually saw me. I'd spent years building a dream that meant something. Not just financially, but personally. It was mine. My quiet, steady attempt to make something useful in this world. And he handed it to Natalie like I was just a walking ATM. I booked a one-way ticket that night. Phoenix. I had a college friend there who owed me a favor and had a couch. That was all I needed. 3 days later, I was stocking shelves in a warehouse and sleeping next to a broken floor fan that buzzed all night. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have the will to fight. But sometimes hitting rock bottom doesn't feel like crashing. It feels like stillness, a dead calm after a hurricane. And it was in that stillness that the real pain set in. Not just pain, shame. I was ashamed that I trusted him. Ashamed that I didn't see it coming, that I let myself be small for so long. Easy to overlook, easy to use. And worse, I'd let it define me. I felt pathetic, weak, replaceable. I didn't tell anyone what happened, not even my closest friends. What would I even say? Oh, hey, my dad gave my entire life savings to my sister because she's fun. So I stayed quiet, but the world didn't. I started seeing photos on social media. Natalie smiling in front of pastel cupcakes, my mom boasting about how proud they were of their daughter's new venture. Not children, just Natalie. And then came the kicker. One morning, I woke up to a message from my cousin back home. Dude, heard your sister's bakery is killing it. Congrats to her, and to you too, I guess. That I guess sent me spiraling. It was like the world assumed I had been part of it, that I'd given her my support, that I was proud. I wanted to scream, but instead, I went to work. I stocked shelves. I delivered packages. I started freelancing logistics support on the side. Just small gigs. At night, I wrote plans. I updated my business model. I built a new one from scratch. I no longer wanted their support. I wanted my own power. And the truth is, pain is a hell of a motivator. I stopped waiting to be seen. I started doing the kind of work no one claps for. The late nights, the boring contracts, the lonely hustle. While Natalie posted photos of macarons and ribbon-cutting ceremonies, I was learning how to flip small commercial leases. I studied property law. I took online classes in business credit and corporate structuring. I didn't even know what I was working toward yet. I just knew I'd never let anyone reduce me again. The first shift happened quietly. One of the logistics clients I'd freelanced for offered me a full-time role as a consultant. I said no, but I countered with an offer. They could hire me to run a small distribution hub they wanted to build out. I'd take a lower salary in exchange for a minor equity share. They accepted, and just like that, I had leverage. Real, long-term leverage. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't cupcakes and storefronts, but it was real. I used every dollar I made to invest. No cars, no vacations, no upgrades, just moves. By the end of the second year, I had partial ownership in 2 warehouse spaces and a 7% equity stake in a logistics startup that was starting to get buzz in the Southwest. But still, I never said a word to my family. They never reached out either. It was like I'd fallen off the planet and they didn't miss me. Until I got a call one morning from a number back home. I didn't answer, but I knew what it meant. They needed something. Turns out, Sugar House Bakery was expanding, or trying to. Natalie wanted to lease the building next to hers and turn it into an event space. Weddings, brunches, baby showers, whatever rich suburbia demanded. I knew that building. It used to be a rundown carpet store when I was a kid. Now, it was one of 5 buildings that had just gone up for sale. Guess who bought the lot? Me! I didn't do it out of spite, at least not fully. I did it because I could. Because while my family had ignored me, dismissed me, and left me behind, I had been building, in silence, in shadows. And now, the foundation was solid. The first time I walked past Sugar House again, it looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the new paint job, or the pastel umbrellas outside, or maybe it was just that I'd grown. Not taller, not stronger, but wider in vision, deeper in patience. I didn't stop to look inside. I didn't need to. I already owned the deed to the building across the street, and the one 2 doors down. I was slowly closing in, quietly, carefully, like a chess player who already knows how the game ends but is savoring each move. Natalie didn't know. Neither did my dad, and I preferred it that way. Revenge isn't about rate. Not really. It's about clarity. About no longer needing anyone to see your worth, because you finally see it yourself. And with that clarity came silence. I didn't gloat. I didn't post. I didn't announce my return. I just showed up. One day, I signed a lease for an office space right above a Pilates studio in the same plaza where Sugar House stood. It was small, just 2 rooms and a window that faced the alley. But it was mine. From there, I ran my growing logistics company and managed the commercial properties I was slowly acquiring. I hired a property manager, James, former Marine, sharp eyes, doesn't miss a thing. He handled all communication with tenants. My name never showed up on any lease paperwork. No one knew who the owner was. That was by design. I wasn't there to play hero or villain. I was there to build a fortress so solid they'd never see the architect. The first sign that the tide was shifting came when James forwarded me an email chain from Natalie's assistant. Apparently, they were struggling to renew their lease due to a new clause in the rental agreement, something about zoning adjustments and property improvements. Natalie was confused, annoyed. "We've always had a great relationship with the owner," she wrote. "This can't be happening." It was happening, but I wasn't trying to evict her. I just wanted her to feel uncertain, unsteady, like I had. And it was working. In the months that followed, I kept growing. I invested in an industrial kitchen property on the west side. I bought into a delivery fleet that catered to small bakeries and cafes. Funny, right? One of those clients? Sugar House. They had no idea I was profiting from every box of flour they received, every morning delivery that rolled up behind their shop. And still, I said nothing. But my silence was different now. It wasn't hollow. It was full of knowing. Then came the day I wasn't expecting. My father called. Not a text, not an email. A phone call. I let it ring. Then another. And another. Finally, I picked up. Not because I missed him, but because I was curious what it felt like to hear his voice again, now that I owed him nothing. "Michael," he said, voice unsure, softer than I remembered. "It's been a while." I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. "Listen, there's been some stuff going on. Natalie's business is struggling a bit. She might need help. Thought maybe if you were back in town, you could stop by." I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. Then I said, "I'm around." I didn't ask how he was. I didn't ask about my mom. I didn't even ask why he'd really called. Because I already knew. People don't miss what they take for granted. Until it stops being available. A week later, I was sitting at a local community networking event. Not because I needed to be there, but because Natalie was speaking on a panel. The topic? Women in small business. She walked in wearing her signature rose-pink blazer and that sugary confidence she always carried. The crowd adored her. They clapped at every joke, nodded at every insight. And yet, I saw it in her eyes. Panic, stress, desperation tucked beneath a polished smile. I slipped out early. 2 days later, James informed me that the bakery had requested a meeting with the property owner to renegotiate their lease. Rising supply costs, dwindling foot traffic, repairs needed in the back kitchen. They were hoping for leniency. I told James to schedule the meeting. I would attend. But I wouldn't introduce myself, at least not right away. The conference room wasn't fancy. White walls, cheap chairs, fluorescent lighting that buzzed when the AC kicked on. But it was mine, and soon they'd know. James sat beside me, calm and professional. Across the table sat Natalie, her assistant, and, surprise, my father. He looked older than I remembered, more gray, less certain, but still trying to hold the room like he always did. "Thank you for meeting with us," Natalie began, flashing a rehearsed smile. "We're hoping we can find some flexibility in the new lease terms. Sugar House has been a part of this block for years now, and with rising costs," she went on, explaining everything from broken sinks to supplier issues. I listened, silent, still letting her talk. At one point, she looked directly at me and smiled again. And we really hope the owner sees the value of keeping things local, keeping our family-run shop thriving. James nodded. The owner is here. Would you like to speak to him directly? My sister straightened up. My dad looked confused. I thought you handled everything, he said to James. I do, but for decisions like this, the owner prefers to be involved. James turned to me and gave a simple nod. So I spoke, slow, calm. I've reviewed your request. I understand you're asking for a freeze on rent increases and a delay on maintenance charges. Is that correct? Natalie blinked. Yes. Wait, sorry, are you a? Yes, I said. I'm the owner. You could hear a pin drop. My father looked like someone had poured ice water down his back. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Natalie stared at me like I'd grown a second head. I don't understand, she said finally. You don't have to, I replied. The terms are the terms, nothing personal. But how? She stammered. You left, you disappeared. I looked her straight in the eyes. No, I said, I was just quiet. And in that moment, all those years of being the background character, of swallowing disrespect, of being dismissed and overlooked, evaporated. I wasn't small anymore. I was the one holding the pen. My father finally leaned forward. Son, let's talk outside. There's nothing to talk about, I said, not cruelly, just firmly. You made your choices. This is mine. He tried again. Look, this doesn't have to get ugly. We're family. That word, family, it almost made me laugh. Where was family when you handed away my future without asking? Where was family when I sat in that warehouse apartment, wondering how I was going to start over? I stood up. The lease stands. Pay it or don't. The space is in demand either way. Natalie's voice was quieter now. So that's it? You just came back to crush us? I paused, looked down for a second, and said, No, I came back to own what's mine. Then I turned to leave. But before I walked out, I left them with one final line. Not loud, not angry, just surgical. You believed in her so much you stole from me to help her fly. Turns out, I never needed wings. Just distance. And I walked out. No mic drop. No dramatic exit. Just the click of the door behind me and the echo of my own footsteps, finally walking away with power. That night, I went home, opened a bottle of wine, and sat on the balcony of the apartment above their bakery, the one I now lived in. I looked down at Sugar House. The lights were still on, but they felt dimmer now. The power had shifted, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing approval. I was in control. It's been 2 years since that meeting. Sugar House is still standing. Barely. They pay rent on time. Most of the time. But the bakery lost its sparkle. The crowds thinned. The novelty wore off. And Natalie? She stopped smiling in her photos. I never raised the rent, never retaliated, didn't need to. There's something more powerful than punishment. It's presence. Being there, quietly, unbothered. A reminder that I survived what was meant to break me and came back stronger. Now I wake up in a space I own, walk to an office I built, and work with people who see me. I take calls from partners who value my ideas. I sign leases for buildings I used to walk past as a kid thinking, maybe one day became this day. And that old part of me, the one who begged for validation, for acknowledgement, is gone. Replaced by someone steady, rooted, free. My father hasn't called again, not once. I sometimes wonder if he's ashamed. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe he still thinks he did the right thing, giving Natalie a chance. Maybe he tells himself I did fine in the end, but it's not about that anymore, because I no longer need an apology. That's the part they never taught me. You don't need to win the argument. You just need to stop playing a game you were never meant to lose. I heard from a cousin recently. She said Natalie might sell the bakery. Something about burnout, market changes. My guess? She's tired. Or maybe she's just tired of living in a shadow she didn't know existed. Funny how that works. As for me, I take long walks in the morning. I eat slowly. I don't rush to prove anything. And on Sundays, I sit on the balcony and watch the town go quiet. People park, shop, carry their paper bags full of pastries or supplies or tools. They walk across property lines I own, and they don't know that the boy who once slept on a friend's couch, wondering how he'd ever bounce back, now owns the block. There's a kind of peace in not needing to be seen, in building not to prove a point, but because you believe in what you're building. Still, if someone asked me what I'd say to the kid I was, the one who got robbed of his dream, I'd tell him this: they can take your money, they can take your moment, but they can't take your mind. And if you trust that long enough, if you water it when no one's watching, one day they'll walk into your empire and not even know whose name is on the deed. That's not revenge. That's reclamation. That's power. That's peace. And as I close this chapter, not bitter, not vengeful, just whole, I hope someone out there hears this and knows your silence isn't your weakness, it's your seed. Water it, let it grow. And when the time is right, let it bloom in the sunlight of your own making.